Hello, my name is Harrison Mabjish, and today I'm going to be discussing the effects of nitrogen on Earth's atmosphere. First, I'm going to discuss what nutrient pollution is. Nutrient pollution occurs when contamination of water occurs due to too many nutrients added to an environment. Nitrogen is an important substance in many different assets of life. As we know, nitrogen is the most abundant gas in the air we breathe. Nitrogen is also a key factor in maintaining aquatic ecosystems as it supports growth of plants and algae, which in turn provides for the other life forms that are a part of the ecosystem. Although nitrogen can cause damage if too much of it is produced. If too much nitrogen goes into an environment, then that environment will have been polluted. If too much of nitrogen enters into an ecosystem, then the algae and plants will grow too rapidly compared to what the ecosystem can maintain regularly. This pollution can cause damage to people too if in contact with the toxins. Even at low levels, it can be harmful, according to EPA.gov.
Hi, my name is Anna Meyer, and I'm going to be talking about nitrogen deposition and changes in ecosystem composition and biodiversity. First, I'd like to start out with what nitrogen deposition is. Nitrogen deposition is the input of nitrogen in an environment from the biosphere. This can occur by both wet deposition or rainfall and dry deposition by gases. Changes in nitrogen deposition can occur from high population densities, livestock, and nitrogen loading. High population densities in livestock operations and industry greatly affect nitrogen deposition because it can cause conversion of the environment. For example, the Netherlands have the highest nitrogen deposition in the world, which affects ecosystem composition. In the Netherlands, high nitrogen deposition have caused the heathlands, which consist of sandy, nitrogen-poor soils, to become more similar to ecosystems with fertile soil that support different species of plants and animals. Nitrogen loading can also cause change in the nitrogen deposition of an ecosystem. In England, the experimental addition of nitrogen led to an increased dominance by nitrogen-demanding grasses. The loss of diversity can affect many aspects of ecosystem function. Nitrogen deposition increases biodiversity because it can change the dominant species of an ecosystem. This was reviewed in the experiment in England. It also affects the overall composition of the community as observed in the Netherlands. For example, on the right is a picture depicting different levels of nitrogen deposition in mosses resulting from wet nitrogen deposition. As you can see, the high nitrogen content moss can be found in an urban setting or ecosystem. This is due to the high population density that was discussed in the previous slide. Now compare the urban ecosystem to the rural ecosystem. What you will see is a decrease of nitrogen-bearing mosses. This is due to low population in rural ecosystems. In rural ecosystems, amounts of nitrogen emissions into the atmosphere are low because it is not as heavily populated as the urban ecosystem. In other words, the precipitation in rural ecosystems is less likely to contain high amounts of nitrogen. Therefore, mosses containing nitrogen are unable to grow, unlike in the city where nitrogen deposition by rainfall is high.
Hello, my name is Amira McKee, and I will be speaking on how nitrogen saturation affects ecosystemic function. First, we need to know what nitrogen saturation is. This is when nitrogen availability is increased in biological functions that were previously limited. This also means that nitrogen deposition, which was discussed in the previous slide, is very excessive. With this increase in nitrogen, there is a decrease in nutrient cations, or positively charged ions, and increased soil and water acidity. This means that the functions that are carried about by organisms inside the ecosystem are no longer functioning properly due to the acidic levels of the soil and the water. This increased nitrogen concentration in lakes, streams, and other bodies of water. There is also a nutrient imbalance in trees due to this pH imbalance, and this is linked to decrease in overall photosynthesis and increase in mortality in coniferous evergreen forests. Nitrogen saturation is detrimental to these environments.
The increase of nitrate in bodies of water is positively correlated with human population densities. The nitrate increase is due to fertilization inputs, and more significantly, atmospheric deposition of oxidized nitrogen. High levels of nitrate in human drinking water is very dangerous because it causes microorganisms in the human stomach to convert nitrate to nitrite. Nitrite absorbed in the bloodstream can convert hemoglobin to methemoglobin, which does not effectively transport oxygen and can lead to a rare disease known as methemoglobinemia. Acidification disrupts the nitrogen cycle in freshwater ecosystems. This is largely due to nitric acid and ammonium deposits. Also, eutrophication is caused by an excessive amount of nitrogen in a body of water, which leads to a depletion of oxygen in the water and causes a loss of diversity in plants and animals.
Hello, my name is Madison Mills, and I'll be discussing some of the major uncertainties with the global nitrogen cycle. The first big uncertainty is with nitrogen fixation in the ocean. Due to our lack of knowledge of the unmodified nitrogen cycle in the ocean, it is difficult to evaluate the effect of human actions on the nitrogen fixation. Another uncertainty is how organisms and ecosystems perform due to the constant change in nitrogen concentrations. Some biological processes were once limited by nitrogen supply, but now have large amounts of nitrogen, causing other limitations of other resources to be more important. And it's in question how these species are evolving with the constant change in nitrogen concentrations. Lastly is the ability for an ecosystem to retain nitrogen. There is a large variation in the nitrogen capacity between ecosystems due to many things such as soil texture and past human land use, but it is uncertain as to how they have changed and how they will continue to change as time continues. Next, I will be discussing the future prospects. Most of the nitrogen fixation is due to human-related actions in food production. Large agricultural businesses rely on large quantities of nitrogen used for things such as fertilizer. As the population grows, this is expected to increase to yield more crops to feed the population. Fertilizer is looked at as a relatively cheap commodity, so it's used quite often. Studies have been done to test the efficiency of nitrogen, and it has been shown that by applying a more knowledge-intensive system, farmers can yield more crops, and it's cheaper than just applying a lot of fertilizer. Another future prospect is restoring natural wetlands. Wetlands were once drained to have more agricultural land, but by eliminating them, we also eliminated natural nitrogen traps. Lastly, fuel combustion is a huge contribution to nitrogen fixation, and as the world evolves, will only increase, but people are hoping to improve the efficiency of fuel combustion as time and technology improves.
In summary, the nitrogen cycle impacts all ecosystems on Earth. Because of humanity's industrialism, with things such as burning of fossil fuels and the clearing out of natural resources, we have altered the cycle. This has led to nutrient pollution, decreased photosynthetic growth, acidification of aquatic systems, and much more. Although we are unaware of how the nitrogen cycle affects the ocean and other organisms on this Earth, with our current knowledge, we are able to increase food production for the growing populations with nitrogen fertilization and restore the cycle by maintaining natural wetlands. It is up to us to do our part and help this cycle continue. This is Amira McKee, and thank you for listening to our presentation on changes in the global nitrogen cycle.